In this video, we'll explore the basic options available to us when styling tables and lists in CSS. We'll be modifying this page, which is a single table containing 4 lists and, of course, some basic text. We're going to make the table more aesthetically pleasing, and we'll be modifying each of the list elements so that they all use some slightly different settings. Let's start by styling the table. I've already given it a unique ID. And I think the first thing I'd like to do is add a border to our table, because right now the elements it contains appear to just be floating in white space. We do this with the table's border option. And input for this option can look a couple different ways, but generally you'll see and use it like this. Our first input element is the width of our border. And to create a pretty understated border, let's just stick with the 1 pixel width. Next, we're going to specify the visual style of the border. There's a lot of options here. We could choose dash or double to have a double line, but let's just choose the solid option, which will give us a plain old simple border of a solid color. And lastly, of course, we need to define what color that will be. So let's just choose black to start off with. If we take a look at our web page, we'll see that our borders appeared around the table in its entirety, but the table's individual nodes are still not divided from each other. To get borders that divide the table's cells from each other, we're going to have to style more specifically. Let's use descendant selection to access both the table's header cells and the table's normal cells. We'd like all the borders in our table to look the same, so let's copy and paste the border code we wrote for the general table into each of our new rules. That's going to give us a table that looks like this. And while we've divided up the cells successfully, we now have a double border where we'd expected only a single solid line. That's because each cell is drawing its own border, regardless of if a border from another cell or the table as a whole already exists on that side. There's an easy fix for this that we can do at the table level. Let's use the border collapse option and change it from its default to collapse. This says that whenever 2 borders would normally be drawn in the same place, we'd just like our table to draw 1. And we get the table border that we expected and originally defined. Before we add color to our table, I'd like to play a little bit with these bottom cells. The words Roman numerals and image marker are coming closer to the line than I think looks good. It makes it a little difficult to read and it looks scrunched. We can modify this rule so that the table's standard cells automatically resize themselves, such that no object they contain is ever allowed to come within a certain distance of their borders. We do this with the padding option, and let's choose 5 pixels as our mandatory degree of separation. Before we head back to our browser, let's also add some color to the table. Notice that our general table rule is less specific than the rules for our header cells and general cells. That means that whatever we declare for our general table rule is simply going to act as a default until we update the value in either of these rules. So let's set a default background color to a light green. And then in this rule, which ends up defining the table's header cells, let's change the background color to a darker green. While we're at it, let's also change the color of text within these cells to white. And on that note, we can change all of our table borders to white as well. This will help the table blend into the white page, while still maintaining dividers between the table cells. In addition to the new colors, which are rather hard to miss, notice also that the columns of the table have resized to accommodate the padding rule we declared. That's all the styling we're going to do in tables for this video, but we are going to style the 4 lists that this table contains. The first list style rule we're going to deal with is called list style position. What it does is it declares whether or not the markers of the list count as physical objects in terms of the list positioning and wrapping and interaction with all other elements. List markers declared to be outside don't have any physical interaction with anything. The default is position outside. So in this sense, our lists on the bottom of our table are just dandy because they're on our position outside row. But we do need to change the position rule of our top two lists. So let's start by doing that now. To save you from having to slog through any HTML with me, I've gone ahead and assigned unique IDs to all of the lists in our table. The ones on top are ordered list 1 and unordered list 1. These are the ones whose list style position we'd like to change. So let's go ahead and change list style position for these guys to inside, moving their markers from non-physical elements, which just float to the left of the contents of the list, to physical elements that now must be wrapped and positioned around by everything else. If we make that change and go back, we'll see that our list moved to the right because now our markers are centered within the cells rather than the text that came to the right of them. It looks like the other thing we're supposed to do with our list is change what kind of markers they use. Let's start with the ordered lists. For our top ordered list, it looks like we're supposed to change our markers from these standard numbers 1, 2, the decimal option, to alphabetical values, so A, B. For our bottom ordered list, we're going to change from decimal numbers to Roman numerals. To change the style of a list's markers to one of the many essentially preloaded options, we use list style type. For ordered lists, the default is decimal. And for unordered lists, the default is disk, that filled in round circle. For our first ordered list, we'd like to change from decimal to an alpha value. Our options for alpha values are either upper alpha or lower alpha. Let's go with upper alpha here, which is alphabetical characters in the uppercase, starting with A and going to Z. We also need to style our second ordered list with Roman numerals. So let's make that list style type upper Roman. Just like with alpha values, we could also use lowercase Roman numerals instead. So let's save that and take a quick look, make sure everything worked as expected. And it did. Our final step is to create no marker for the top unordered list and to use a custom image as the marker for the bottom unordered list. So we already have a rule for the top unordered list. And I'm just going to copy list style type and change it to none for no marker. Lastly, we're going to need a rule for unordered list 2. And to use a custom image, we do not use the list style type option. We use list style image. And let's provide the image via a URL. And I've called it marker.png. If we save that, we should see all of our final stylized markers. At the end of this video, you should have a lot of options available to you when styling tables and lists in CSS. I should also mention that everything we did in this video was CSS2. None of it was CSS3 specific. I would encourage you to explore some of the attributes where we didn't go over every possible option. List style type, for example, has many, many options besides alpha, Roman, none, decimal, and our unique image. And a lot of styling options can open up for you if you're aware of all of them.